Welcome back to the Untitled RPG Devlog. This is episode 6. In this episode, I'm going to show you the progress that we've made on the very first dungeon of the game, the Bandit Hideout. First, I'd like to explain how dungeons differ from other areas of the RPG. For most of this game, when you defeat a group of enemies, they're gone from the map forever. This makes backtracking to earlier areas easier and less annoying, since you don't need to fight the weak enemies that were there before. Dungeons, on the other hand, are a little bit different. When you leave a dungeon and come back, all the enemies are reset. This makes the game's limited inventory much more important, since you have to leave the dungeon to restock. Dungeons also have more of a focus on puzzles than other areas of the game. I started work on the Bandit Hideout by sketching out a map of the entire dungeon on paper, marking down the positions of locked doors and switches, and writing down the order the player needs to interact with them. The Bandit Hideout is based around this minecart track. Players board the minecart in the starting room, and it'll take them deeper into the dungeon. By flipping differently colored switches, players can switch the track, redirecting the minecart to other areas of the Bandit Hideout. Players will then be able to backtrack to the first room by opening locked doors. Upon leaving and re-entering the dungeon, the minecart switches get reset to their initial position, but the locked doors the player opens stay open. This means that players need to carefully consider whether leaving the hideout to get more items is worth it. As the name Bandit Hideout implies, this area is the main base of operation for a group of bandits known as the Broken Snowflakes. We already had one bandit enemy, but I felt like we needed some additional ones so the players weren't fighting essentially the same battle over and over again. I plan to add even more enemy variety in the future, but for now players will face Bandit Underlings, Bandit Pyromancers, Bandit Mages, and Batchbots in the dungeon. Bandit Underlings are somewhat weak enemies, but they can inflict players with the obsessive status, causing them to take damage every turn that they have odd HP. This can be really dangerous if left unchecked, and players may want to intentionally take damage to get their HP to an even number again. Bandit Pyromancers mainly use fire attacks, including a weak attack that inflicts burning on their target, and a powerful attack that inflicts burning on themselves. Burning causes characters to take damage if they haven't moved at the end of the turn. Bandit Mages can do damage of any type except physical, so they can be very dangerous to a group that isn't ready for them. Finally, the Batchbots were enemies introduced early on in the game, and while they have a lot of health, they only attack with thunder and physical attacks. They're a pretty easy enemy to deal with, but they'll stick around for a longer time than most of the other enemies do. The last thing that was designed was a boss battle to cap off the hideout. It's common for RPGs to have players face a single powerful enemy at the end of a dungeon, but I had trouble figuring out what that would look like in this game. A lone enemy doesn't pose much of a threat in this game, even if they have above average HP. I didn't want players to finally get to the climactic battle only to find that the boss is easier than the normal enemies in the dungeon. To fix this, I set up a new system for bosses which I'm calling Sigils for now. Essentially, boss characters can summon weak enemies called Sigils to attack additional times. Sigils that are destroyed come back at the beginning of the next turn. Choosing to attack a sigil is an interesting decision, because even though damage you do to them is wasted, allowing them to attack your party unchecked can be dangerous. I'm pretty happy with how the battle with Glatia, the first boss of the Bandit Hideout, turned out. She uses ice attacks and summons snow sigils that also do ice damage. She has two powerful new moves, Frozen Heartbeat and Cold Embrace. Frozen Heartbeat will inflict the opposing character with weakened, flammable, shivering, conductive, seated, heavy, and unbalanced for 3 turns. Essentially, all those status effects mean that they gain weakness for every single element in the game, amplifying the damage that they'll take in the battle. Cold Embrace, on the other hand, makes Glatia invincible to damage on her next turn. Once the players defeat Glatia, that ends all the main story content that needs to be developed for the vertical slice. That means from this point on, I'll be focusing on developing side content, fixing bugs, and adding more equipment to the game. Meanwhile, Ross is working on updating the user interface for the battle system, and reworking all the terrible developer art I've put into the game. So what do you think of the first dungeon? Let me know in the comments below, and if you want to keep following the progress of this game, I'd love it if you subscribed. Thanks, and have a great day.